Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It's Tuesday, and I'm trapped at home working off my iPhone. And of course, Mike says, "Hey, for whatever, your lighting looks better than ever." I'm like, you know what? I crawl out of bed. I basically got my iPhone strapped on and a table lamp, and he says I look better than ever. He hurt both my feelings, but that hardly matters. What does matter, what matters fundamentally, is my fantasy football team, and the Law and Legitimacy team lost last night. I'll say no more than congratulations to Justin Carter. Cherish this victory. It won't last. I'll be back next week. Go blue. My Michigan against everyone T-shirts arrived last night. I'll be sporting one in the office today as soon as I end my teleconference with the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit in a case against New York University for the violation of a student's Title IX rights. But anyhow, let's talk about Jenna Ellis. There's a video out of Jenna being debriefed apparently by prosecutors in the Georgia RICO case involving Trump and others. And in the video, which I think was it ABC or NBC that posted
ABC.
it? So
ABC.
in the video is edited, and it's a pretty skillful job of editing. And you can see a couple times in the interview that the topic switches, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that the editing didn't alter the content. But what she says is that prior to Christmas in mid-December of 2020, she met with acting deputy or at least a senior White House counsel. I'm not entirely sure who that
It
is.
was actually Dan Scavino, and so he was the media.
Was
He
it
ran.
Dan?
Yes.
What? I've listened to that a couple times. Okay, let's just assume it was. And she said, basically that there really wasn't any legal. She tells him, according to this debriefing, that there wasn't any legal basis or basis in fact to conclude that the election had been stolen. And that's that. And Scavino, if that's who it was, said, "It doesn't matter. We're not leaving." That you know that that is going to create lifelong credibility problems for Jenna Ellis. And I've never been a Jenna Ellis fan. I mean, when she emerged from nowhere, and everybody was talking about her as a constitutional lawyer, I'm thinking, what case has she ever litigated? And why have I not heard of her before? And I think the reason, the answer is none. And she was plucked from obscurity by the Trump people and burst onto the scene to have her 15 minutes of fame as one of Trump's lieutenants in his efforts to overturn the votes in 2020 and his claim that the votes were fraudulently obtained. Okay, that's fine. That's her client. She's advancing his position. But if she was acknowledging internally in the White House in the Christmas season of 2020 that there was no basis of going forward to go forward, while saying publicly that there was, and taking that position, she's just got lifelong egg on her face, and I'm not sure how she survives that. Now, this raises a question, and that is, what are we to believe? Jenna is now what's called a cooperating witness. She has been, quote unquote, flipped by Georgia. In other words, Georgia has has offered her a plea deal. She's pleading guilty, and part of that plea agreement requires her to, quote unquote, testify truthfully in any case where her testimony is required. Because she's pled guilty, she's lost, at least with respect to Georgia, the ability to assert the Fifth Amendment. She probably retains it as to federal offenses, but apparently she's prepared to testify and to waive her right to remain silent there as well. So she'll now be offered as a witness, and she will be exposed to cross-examination. And the cross-examination will fall along predictable themes. It is not uncommon in a multi-defendant case for the government to flip witnesses, that is, to enter plea deals with them and require them to testify in their case in chief. cross-examination usually runs along the following lines. You initially pled not guilty in this case. Yes. Was that a lie? No. Well, you've now changed your position and you've pled guilty. Yes. And you've pled guilty because you want something. You wanted something. Isn't that right? And the answer is I decided to tell the truth. And you ignore that response. What you wanted was a better deal than you'd gotten if you had insisted on your initial position. That is, that you were not guilty, that you were innocent. The judge will have to decide my fate. I'm placing my hand in the judge. You've agreed to cooperate with the government in its case against Donald Trump in this case, haven't you? I've agreed to testify truthfully. And the testimony you're offering today is testimony that you first rehearsed behind closed doors, but on videotape with your lawyer and the Georgia State's Attorney's Office. Didn't you? I don't understand the question. What do you mean by rehearsing? Well, you're testifying here in open court on the record in the presence of the entire world, the universe. Anybody who cares to watch can see you here today. Isn't that right? Yes. But this isn't the first time you've said these things. No, you said it behind closed doors in taped proceedings. Yeah. How, how many versions of that tape were there? How many times did you practice that before the tape went on? How many times did you have to utter those words before you came to believe them to be true? Well, they are the truth. Were they true the day you pled not guilty? I don't understand your question. Ma'am, the fact of the matter is you've lied at least once in this case, haven't you? Well, I don't understand. Well, were you lying when you pled not guilty, or are you lying today when you said in December? And that's the way it's going to break one way or another. There's going to be some variant of that cross-examination. And Jenna's going to have to say, that at one point she was disingenuous and now she should be believed. And jurors have a tendency to believe cooperating witnesses. A standard trope or set piece of a prosecutorial closing argument is, we don't go to central casting for our witnesses. We take our witnesses where we find them. And in a conspiracy case, we don't go to the College of Cardinals or the National Association of Bishops for our witnesses. We go to co-conspirators, and some co-conspirators decide to ultimately to tell the truth, and others don't. You'll have to decide whether Ms. Ellis's testimony is truthful or whether it's a recent fabrication. The defense will argue that Jenna Ellis is a liar, that she was afraid. She's trying to save her skin and her law license and what's left of her reputation. And she did so in the most craven way possible. She swore an oath to serve the President of the United States. She regarded him as a client. She turned on her client and threw him under the bus to save her own skin. And that's the very worst sort of rat jumping off a sinking ship. And if you want to place the fate of the Republic in the hands of someone like Jenna Ellis, go right ahead, but don't complain when all the cheese in your pantry disappears, and it'll go something like that. And it just isn't any more interesting than that. But I watched the Jenna Ellis tape this morning. Mike, thanks for sending it along. And I just thought, poof, she never recovers from this. I mean, I know she hopes to keep her law license. But I just don't think she recovers.
What do you
It's a
make
bad
from
look.
this? What do you make from this Cernovich post? He says Jenna Ellis still got a felony, even though she is cooking up fake stuff. That's legal malpractice. If you're going to do jailhouse snitch tall tales, you need a misdemeanor at most.
I love Mike. Mike had worked in my office as a law student when he was at Pepperdine, and he'd come out to do work for me after his graduation from Pepperdine. But I just think he's wrong at that. Obviously, there are a number of harms that Jenna faced. One was imprisonment, and so in this case, she walks. If she has to walk while taking a felony, it's still no prison. Would a better deal have been a misdemeanor? Yes. But from the Georgia State's Attorney's perspective, the felony makes her more credible rather than less. So I disagree with Mike, and I don't think it's legal malpractice. The fact of the matter is that clients, it's a lawyer's job to advise, a client's job to decide. And in the context of plea bargaining, you cut the best deal that you can, and then you say to the client, it's not going to get any better than this. You got to choose, you got to pick your poison. Go to trial. I'll defend you as best I can. If you're convicted, you'll likely get a felony and go to jail. If you enter this plea, you're going to have a felony, but not go to jail, and your reputation will be destroyed. You decide. And so Jenna chose her liberty over her reputation.
Well, here's my take on some of this as well. So maybe an alternative method to look at this stuff. You just simply type in the name Jenna Ellis and then search for the results from the past day. and these will begin to permeate all searches related to Jenna Ellis. And this is the sort of mimetic warfare that we are involved with, Norm. If I'm going to scroll here, but take a look at the headlines that show up, and I'm curious as to the nature of the video making its way into the public consciousness at the time that it has right now. I'm wary that Jenna Ellis is going to be a useful witness for the prosecution in the case against Trump, but I don't know that that's necessarily the point of the video making its way into the public consciousness and going viral in the way it has. I think that what we can look at in terms of search results that are being generated on search engines tells a lot about what this trial is ultimately about, because to me this is the candidacy for Donald Trump is fighting through, and we've talked about this, Norm, so this isn't really a novel theory, but Donald Trump's candidacy for the president of the United States in 2024 is his defenses against the myriad lawsuits he's facing right now and criminal prosecutions he's facing right now. In particular, with Jenna Ellis, she has now been co-opted as an asset of the political left, to the opposition of Donald Trump, not just in the trial by way of her becoming a witness or offering testimony against Donald Trump, but if we're looking at these headlines, it's Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis spilled to Georgia prosecutors about Trump. That's from the Daily Beast. Forbes, Trump official told attorney Jenna Ellis the boss is not going to leave. ABC News, video and proffer two videos. Two ex-Trump lawyers tell GA prosecutors. ABC News, the boss is not going to leave. Proffer video shows ex-Trump lawyer. Mediaite, Jenna Ellis told GA prosecutors Trump never intended to leave White House. New York Times, lawyer says Trump aide told her after 2020 election, the boss is da-da-da-da-da. The Hill, Ellis told Georgia prosecutors Trump planned to stay in power. Washington Post, ex-Trump allies detail efforts to overturn election in Georgia plea video. AJC, Business Insider, CNN. You go down the list here, Norm. So if one is necessarily inclined against Trump or just merely inquisitive, but not as exacting in the way that they curate information, they simply put it into a search bar. What is one to assume about the nature of her testimony in this Trump prosecution in Georgia? And I can't hear you now, Norm. I don't know what happened. Your sound has gone out. Man, I thought that was such a good lead up. Almost like Chris Paul throwing an alley-oop, right? And then whomever is supposed to catch the alley-oop just whiffs. Here comes Norm. All right, we can hear you now.
So somebody had, called, and I had to block the call, and that cost us a thing. I heard you. The more fundamental. These are great questions you raise, and so in my view, if I'm Trump's lawyers, I ask who leaked that tape. Because if Donald Trump says something that affects the jury pool or how people regard witnesses in the case at all, there's going to be a motion for a gag order. We're going to have to protect the administration of justice. Who had possession of that videotape and who had an interest in leaking it? Fannie Willis's office, certainly not Jenna Ellis's lawyer. And so somebody leaked that to the public at large. My presumption is that it was Fannie Willis's office, and I think that Trump's lawyers should be moving for sanctions against her, because this obviously is going to affect the jury pool for all the reasons you previously stated when you do the Google search. And if a party is prohibited from making an extrajudicial, that is, an out-of-court statement that is likely to affect the nature of the proceedings, that party is engaged in sanctionable conduct. And so my view is that Trump should be filing a motion in the Georgia court demanding that the source of this leak be reflected, and he should seek sanctions up to and including dismissal of the case, because obviously this is going to affect his fair trial rights.
There's no doubt. And the warfare is being basically fought on two fronts at this point. So,
well, off we go. Hey, so more, yesterday we talked a little bit about some returning to Venezuela And one of them, we quoted him by name, and I don't recall the name. I don't have my notes here, basically saying there's nothing here for us. The American dream is over. The next day, the New York Times, I believe, and others are reporting yet another shot or perspective on the prospects for the American dream. And that is plenty of other people are leaving the country, but they're dying to get out, and meaning they're not pining away, they're literally dying. We once again have data showing declines in life expectancy in the United States, particularly among men, at a time when other press reports are reporting that Michigan is now seeking to adopt laws for medically assisted suicide. Something's going on in the country. And, I have to stand with Vivek Ramaswamy here and say that what that something is a loss of hope in our prospects. The life expectancy for men is now, I believe, 73. So I got a few years left in me. I got to make the most of them. That's why I spend the mornings here with you all and with Mike. But, life expectancy for men, I think, is down to an average of 73. Women, it's about 79. Proof yet once again of systemic genderism, and that the deck is stacked against men. But on a serious note, among the reasons for this decline in life expectancy are use of narcotics, use of opioids, not getting medical attention. There's a suggestion that if more people had simply gotten the jab, more of them would have lived. And so one of the implicit messages is, succumb to the blandishments in the medical industrial complex, and you too can live longer. But to what end? We've talked many times on this show about Deaths of Despair, the book by Angus Deaton and Ann Case, that came out in 2020 amid the summer of love, and the message got lost. We were so busy mourning George Floyd and his prospects that we never paid attention to the fact that for white working class men, death rates are soaring. And they're soaring not because these individuals are filled with hope, but because they're filled with despair. And the source of those deaths in the Deaton and Case study is opioid use, alcohol use and abuse, and straight out suicide. The CDC report further advances that narrative and raises larger questions about hope, a place called hope, and the role of hope and the role of a sense of a healthy community in giving people reasons to live. The Michigan assisted suicide story is an odd juxtaposition to this, because at a time when statisticians marvel at an overall decline in death or in life expectancy in the United States, we've got yet another state, this could be, I believe, the 10th state, seeking to make it possible for physicians to fulfill the Hippocratic Oath while killing people, while helping them end their own lives. I think, Mike, you noted in a discussion this morning with me that in Canada, the fifth major cause of death is physician-assisted suicide.
Yep.
Now, it's obvious no one gets out of here alive. I mean, to all men are mortal. We're men, therefore we're mortal. And how one copes with the end of life is certainly an important fact for aging Americans. But if the message is, when it gets tough, get out. When you can take your own life with the assistance of the medical professions when you no longer want to live it, that's sort of sending a message and endorsing a false notion of individual utility and of individual efficacy. We never have been the masters of our own destiny. You can see how far that takes you when you go to the world of identity politics, and each pot saying to the potter, "Why makest me thus?" and protesting to the point of demanding recognition of every idiosyncrasy. Every difference is somehow an expression of our individual sacrosanctity. But when we make ourselves sacrosanct, that becomes a form of self-idolization that leads nowhere. And I know you're tired of hearing me say it, but there are other podcasts, you can listen to them. Sin is love of the wrong thing. And it seems to me that this embrace of autonomy, this embrace of the ability to glorify, recognize, deify the self at the expense of the community is a classic example of hubris. And that these deaths of despair, the embrace of assisted suicide as an acceptable way to end your own life with the medical profession is a further sign of disintegration of communal values and of something that once made the West unique. We valued individuals as created in the image of God and as these semi-divine sparks amid a world of pain and suffering and of sin. We cherished the lives that we had and the lives of one another, and recognized the community's response to find a way to make those lives meaningful are deciding it's not meaningful. And the medical profession is saying, you know what, you're right, we'll help you leave. Somehow that is one step, maybe two, removed from a situation in which society will decide which lives are worth living, rather than individuals deciding for themselves. And somehow the public health state begins to emerge with an even more ferocious set of teeth. We can help you end your life if your life is unsatisfactory, becomes one step removed from saying, we'll help you end your life when your life becomes too unsatisfactory to the group, to the community, when the cost of sustaining it is greater than the benefit to the group as a whole, however those costs and benefits are raised. So, I'd ask you all to take a look at that story on decreasing mortality rates in the United States, contrast it to the story that occurred yesterday about immigrants leaving Chicago because the American dream is over. Listen carefully to what Vivek Ramaswamy is saying when he talks about a need for hope, a need for communal norms, a need for values, and take a look at the world around you, which seems rapidly to be disintegrating, and ask yourself, what's responsible for that? My sense is that we've broken faith with the Western tradition. And as a result, we're adrift, and we're a civilization that is becoming unmoored and untethered to the values that created it. And we are blowing through the moral capital of millennia at a breakneck pace, and we're paying for it now in our very lives.
Yeah, the Michigan bill appears to uh, put constraints around who is eligible for medically assisted suicide, and they brand it as a term of art known as terminally ill. So I want to make sure that factually we contrast sort of I think the sentiment that you're expressing here, Norm, that I share 100% with what we're looking at for Michigan specifically. Medical physicians must determine that there's some sort of terminally ill condition and that the patient is likely to die within a 6-month period.
Yeah, well,
But
that's the standard requirement, right?
right. And so yeah, and so but I think the larger question that we're asking here is that, is it appropriate that our medical profession, our establishment, I guess medical apparatus be preoccupied with giving people the option to just hit the eject button with 6 months to live? It seems that on both sides of the curve, both at the phase of birth and in the waning stages of life, there is a sort of socio-political cultural move from one side of our politics that seems to really just be fine with catering to the material, I guess, material sort of flesh of the middle of that bell curve, right? That we don't really have much of a preoccupation with America writ large, right, is okay with abortion right now. We've seen that in the most recent round of elections. And I'm not saying that anybody who watches this show or that is voting is actually okay with it. What we're seeing is that young people are so thirsty for purpose that their only way to derive that in the current American society is to appeal to their base level wants and desires, right? And that is to avoid additional obligation that they might attribute to marriage and or parenthood. It is, related to sort of needing to make money and join the professional class, et cetera. There is a declining sense of legitimacy in the entire system that sort of sets the foundation for this stuff. Even such that, I mean, these things to me, Norm, seem to be almost, I don't want to give it credit because I think that I do think it's evil incarnate that we are assisting people, that we are encouraging people to take an early exit to their life. It really does cheapen it. I think the irony is that they say death with dignity, and it's just I don't see anything dignified about this methodology other than sort of trying to avoid the pain of death. And but what I'm looking at is that if younger people, if younger Americans are not, you know, investing themselves into creation of family, right, whether it's marriage and or children, and propagating a life that serves more than sort of the day-to-day purpose of the 9 to 5 or making money, that at the end of one's life there is going to be precious little to resort to other than some sort of like firm medical establishment that will just sort of, vacuum you in and then, sort of facilitate your peaceful exit, right, that you're not going to have family around.
Yeah, no, it feels very much like 1984. I stopped in one of my favorite bookstores yesterday, R.J. Julia's in Madison, in southern Connecticut, and I see that there's a new rewrite, as it were, of Orwell's 1984. I can't recall the author. I picked it up, and I plan to start it later this week. And the idea that somehow we can become data points in a vast collective, and that collective can assign values for us, and decide when those values have run its course, is a sign of spiritual poverty. And it seems to me that we've lost track in American political discourse recently of the role of the state in creating a sense of common good. The role of the state is not to provide us with reasons to live. The role of the state is not to provide us with a definition of the common good. The role of the state is to make it possible for private individuals, loose associations, private associations, to achieve value on their own. And it seems to me that we've gotten to a point now where we're looking to the collective to manage our individual. These suicide statistics suggest that that's failing. But let's pivot really quickly, because we're running out of time, to what's going on in Spain. Tucker Carlson's over there, and I saw extraordinary videos last night of as many as 1 million people gathering in downtown Madrid, to protest. Mike, what are the protests about, and what can we learn about what can you tell us about this? What can we learn about ourselves from watching Spain?
Yeah, so Tucker has been sort of on a world tour, right, in recent months, following his departure
He's the
from.
most interesting man alive right now. He
He
gets
really
more
is.
great interviews than anybody I know. You know.
He really is, and I think that is necessarily my preoccupation with this issue in particular. I think that we know that what's happening in Spain is more complicated than the headlines would suggest. So, I think that I'd like to keep a high level on this and just sort of emphasize the point, Norm, that the medium is still the message. It's important to note that without the presence of someone like Tucker Carlson touching down in Spain and being among the people there, that these images of what's going on in Spain would not be available to the Western world largely. So, what I believe is being reported is that there are separatists from the region of Catalan, and that is sort of the northeast, I guess, corner of Spain. So if you look at everything from sort of the peninsula that Spain is, and and it borders France, and as I understand it, Catalonian Spanish is much different from sort of more mainstream Spanish, the Spanish that I learned. There's a reason that the vosotros form is sort of within the dialectic over there, but that there's a long been an issue of assimilation between Catalonians and then what we would, I guess, refer to today as mainstream Spanish culture. And in 2017, separatists actually voted through the Catalonian parliament to actually secede from the country of Spain. And that vote was quickly nullified by the Spanish government. But in the wake of that nullification, the Spanish government has essentially used taxpayer dollars to appease the separatist interests, right? To encourage them to come back into the fold. What I believe we're witnessing on the ground in Spain is a version of something that shares some notes from what's happening here in the United States via Black Lives Matter and other front organizations that on their face might tell the world that they are for the advancement of equitable principles of justice and underrepresented, historically marginalized classes, when in reality we know that the money that's being funneled there through there, through corporate interests, through taxpayer dollars, et cetera, are largely going to the pockets of a few and are being used to funnel and to support means of subverting law and order here in the United States, right? And what we're witnessing on the ground there in Spain is essentially someone like Tucker, who I think at this point we don't have to guess at what his values and principles ultimately are, Norm, right? His putting himself in the context there is important for people to understand that perhaps this is not something like Macron's France. Maybe there's something deeper here for us to explore that bears some similarity to the larger Western problem right now of legitimacy in its institutions.
Well, certainly the creation of community. I mean, one of the issues that apparently has protesters agitated, according to what I read, is the granting of immunity to Catalan separatists, which is sort of the flip side of what I think is necessary in the United States. I mean, I mean, my view is that we continue to prosecute January 6 people to our detriment, to our national detriment. That the continued prosecution of them and demonization of them is creating a thing in American politics. What was once an afternoon's riot is now becoming a rallying point, and will remain so for the years to come. In Spain, the effort to grant immunity to separatists has apparently enraged a significant part of the population. I don't know why, Mike. I think we should follow this more. I mean, I appreciate your point about Tucker, and he is, in my view, the most interesting man alive. He goes to trouble spots. He sheds a necessary light on what's going on, and he does so. I don't think because he necessarily has the answers. He wants to raise questions. So here we have a major democracy in Spain, an ally in Western Europe, that is showing signs of crumbling legitimacy. 1 million people on the streets of Madrid, milling about, angry. A government that can't form, notwithstanding the fact that there were recent elections, and an inability to arrive at a common sense of purpose. I don't think the Spaniards, in that respect, are that much different from others in the West. Having lost a sense of communal purpose, they grope because, in the end, we do need to learn to live together. That's the central preoccupation of the science of politics, ranging all the way back to Aristotle and to Plato. And in the West, we've been able to do so and rally around common conceptions of right. Those conceptions are disappearing, and the imperative to live together remains. So let's keep an eye on the Spain story. One final note. I don't know if anybody out there follows Sam Harris. I don't. I think his sort of aggressive agnosticism, if not atheism, overstates the case, and he loses credibility. But I'm told he's got a great discussion of Islamophobia on the air right now, and his conclusion is there is something fundamentally wrong with Islam. Part of its religious creed celebrates violence and the destruction of others, and it should be no surprise to us that this force, which could be a force that disintegrates certain civilizations with which Islam comes in contact with, is something worth looking at. So I'd encourage all of you to take a look at the Sam Harris thing on Islamophobia, apparently, or on Islam, and I guess it's on jihadism. And I'd like to hear reports from those of you who have a chance to watch it today. As for me, I will be playing law, and we will talk to you again tomorrow morning. So thanks for tuning in.
One more question here from
Yeah.
Jeff in Connecticut. Good morning, Norm. Do you recall the first book you read as a young boy that had an impact on you? Thank you, Jeff.
Well, aside from the Bible, I mean, Paul's book of Romans spoke to me in ways that I will never fully understand. The notion that there was a moral law that we failed, that which I would do, I don't, and what I wouldn't do, I do. The notion in Romans 13 of the foundation of legitimacy, of government being in the will of God, and that there was such a thing as natural law. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. But that book certainly overwhelmed me. Herman Hesse's Steppenwolf. Funny story about Steppen. No, it was Damien. I was reading that in 10th grade, and things weren't exactly harmonious in my household. And I wasn't talking to my mother or her lover at the time, who was living with us. But so one day I'm in my room reading Damien, and it's a dark and dreary scene. And I walk out into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and I look out at the yard, and the sun was shining. And I say to my mother, "When did it stop raining?" And confirmed to her that I was somehow a drug user. Finally, I suppose another book that comes to mind was Thoreau's Walden. That book and his account of growing peas and of being self-sustaining, of independence, of going his own way, that resonates with me. And every few years, I vow to reread all of Walden, and usually lose interest about page 100, 110 or so, when he discussing building his cabin. But those are books that meant something. But to be honest with you, the Bible remains the book that has most influenced me. I think it gives a complete account of the human condition, and it expresses values that have resonated throughout our cultural life for millennia. And I think it has continuing relevance to us in our time today.
If I could just quickly answer the question, I think the first book I can recall having an impact on me, a profound impact, was The Giver, Lois Lowry's The Giver. Norm, I don't know if you've ever read that.
No, I haven't. No.
I do commend that to you.
All right.
Sort of an apparent utopian society revealed to be dystopian.
Oh, you know what? I don't know. I've read about it, but I've never read. And what's the title again?
The Giver.
Yeah. Okay.
So it'll be like an hour read for you, very quick read, but
Right.
all the same profound, right? It's sort of there is the ability to give an individual our senses, right? Color, sound, tacit perception of reality that doesn't exist in sort of the dystopian world that is sort of walled off from reality, right? Pain, suffering, love, those sorts of things. That book really, really gave me a lot that I should probably think deeper about, but that's my answer.
All right. There you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We've talked our way through another 36 minutes or so of your life. Join us tomorrow. Spread the word. We're here. And people need to listen to us because you do. And we appreciate your support. Mike, how do folks find us?
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find premium long-form podcasts is where you'll find the audio-only version of this show. But you can also join us every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and or Friday right here on Rumble Live, on YouTube Live, or on X at LawPod Daily. Wherever you are, please give us a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. Make sure that people know we're here every day for at least a half hour. Norm, go play law. Go get them over at NYU. Then we will look forward to seeing you in the morning.